All right. Hi, everybody. Today's training is Lost Persons, the first hour. It's going to consist of a quick PowerPoint. You've seen most of it before, but maybe some of you haven't. And then there will be a practical skills exercise following. So that'll be good. Please note there's nobody else in the room, so I'm not wearing a mask today. And we'll keep going. All right. First hour. All right. Our objectives. At the completion of this training, we're going to have a basic knowledge of the behaviors involving dementia and autism as it relates to the lost person search. This will give us a good overview of our most common lost people, missing people, and then there are other ones, and we're prepared for that. But we can search those later on. We're also going to identify the steps necessary to perform during the first hour to increase the probability of a successful search. Most searches, at least with the folks that we're going to be dealing with most times, if we get an early search going, the chances of success are much higher. So that is usually a good outcome, but the key is getting that search going early. We're also going to identify the strengths and weaknesses of previous search efforts. You know, not every search goes perfectly. Sometimes they even go not so good, but we're going to look at that in order to critique it and figure out how we can make them better. We've had some good ones in the county. We've also had a couple not so successful ones, but luckily nobody's died, and we're good. So we're going to move on. Lost person searches are definitely on the rise. People are wandering away. There's also more awareness of it. So calls for this type of incident are definitely going up. So there were a couple of us, Brian Hanna, myself, and some other people went to some training in the Blue Ridge Mountains along the Appalachian Trail and did some searches up there and learned a lot about it, and also how to incorporate that into the urban and suburban environment in which we are operating mostly. So that also included some trainer stuff. But really what we got out of it was a very accurate algorithm that we can follow to find most types of lost people. So FEMA paid a guy a lot of money to break down lost and missing persons in various environments to come up with a profile for these folks. And he did so, and it's incredibly accurate. So that's really where we're getting a lot of our information. Now, it does continue to evolve, and we update our algorithms probably twice a year. And they're very accurate. It's pretty shocking how accurate they are. The interesting part of the missing person is that it is a law enforcement issue. So, and that is dictated by the ORC. So just keep that in mind, that the police are going to get this call. They're probably going to operate for an hour or two before calling for additional manpower. It does seem that there's a trend from the PDs of beginning to call earlier, but the average is still around an hour and a half to an hour of law enforcement searching before we get there. And really what we're there for is manpower, ground pounders to search these areas. So one of the things that has started happening is with the unified command, we're getting in there and being able to help them focus their search patterns and ideas, which they're good at, and kind of refine it a little bit. And then we also put additional people, whether it's just a fire department response or it's a fire department with outside agencies such as the County Rescue Team, Task Force 1, or one of those other groups. So the categories of missing people, they're really broken down into three categories, and those are voluntary, lost people, and not lost people. So a voluntary lost person is a runaway or a suicidal subject. They call them despondents, or bad guys, basically, somebody running from the cops. Not lost would be somebody who just didn't arrive back when the reporting party thought they should get there. And an example is that a kid tells his mom he's going to be home from wherever at 6 o'clock, and he doesn't make it because he's scatterbrained or playing video games or whatever. He's not really lost. He's just not where he's supposed to be. So that's a not lost person, and that's a huge percentage of what we deal with the lost, not lost, missing people. And almost 100% of the time, that's a law enforcement issue, and we don't get called for that. The lost person, however, that's when things get interesting, and we're going to break down those folks pretty quick. So this is the definition of lost: disoriented to his or her environment and cannot reason their way out of a predicament. We see people all the time, they can't do that. Mostly in nursing homes or under care of another subject, but occasionally that doesn't work out and they go missing. So who are we identifying as our at-risk community? And this is based on our responses and national responses at a local level, maybe even a state level. So what's been identified is children under the age of 14, elderly who cannot care for themselves, people with Alzheimer's and dementia, also those subjects with mental impairments like Alzheimer's, or not Alzheimer's, I'm sorry, autism, and then, of course, a suicidal, depressed, despondent kind of person. That is categorically who we're looking for most. So we're going to talk about some of these groups a little bit, just kind of give you some information on them as based on a lost person or a search. We all have dealt with the dementia and Alzheimer's patient on our EMS calls, but here's some little tidbits of what we're dealing with. Dementia is a progressive disease that affects the brain. Those subjects, they lose cognitive mapping and situational awareness abilities, which definitely impacts the lost search of the wanderers. We have to be aware of behaviors such as wandering, violence, and catastrophic reactions. And we're going to talk about all of those with kind of a focus on sundowning. And sundowning is a syndrome that causes a state of confusion that occurs later in the afternoon or in the evening. And it really is pretty ugly. It can be anyway. It affects Alzheimer's and dementia patients mostly. And it can give you a broad range of behaviors, including anxiety, confusion, aggression, violence, and we'll cover those. And I'm going to tell you about my father-in-law before he passed. He suffered horribly from sundowners, and it was really pretty awful. So some of the signs and symptoms that you may see are mood swings, anxiety, sadness, restlessness, energy surges. And these energy surges, they can go from 0 to 60 like immediately. So better than the new Tesla does. They're definitely confused. In fact, increased confusion usually. Hallucinations and delusions are normal. Pacing, rocking, crying, screaming, disorientation, resistance is a big one. Anger, aggression, and violence. Those are some of the basics. But they can be any combination of those. It's just some crazy stuff. So expect the unexpected with these folks. Oftentimes, these people get their days and nights mixed up or reversed. It's really hard on them. But other times, it's turning on and off the light switch, or might only last an hour or two. It really is kind of a freaky thing. So my father-in-law, before he died, he was a World War II vet and was shot down over Europe, and he would go back to the war a lot of times when the sun went down, which would cause him to do all kinds of crazy things, including act out his capture and some of the other things with the doctors and so forth that wasn't real pleasant for him. The other thing it would do, since he was captured and was in a medical facility, he would actually try to escape what he assumed to be the medical facility, which was actually his house. And we actually found him wandering. We live in Fairfield. He lived just down the street from me. I passed him one day down at Applebee's. If you know where Applebee's is down in Fairfield, I was driving home from Kroger's, and And there Carl was walking down the street. He had no idea what he was doing, except for that he was evading the bad guys. So he got really, really freaky. And then other times he would be throwing things. He would all kinds of craziness. And the other thing he would try to do is wander. When he wandered away from the house, was he would go try to find his wife, who had been dead for quite a few years before that, and he was heading for the cemetery, which he never got to. Luckily, we caught him. Sundowners is an ugly thing. We'll talk about how to approach these folks a little bit here in the near future, but be very careful with these folks. They can turn on you on a dime. So what do you do when you find a subject who is a sundowners? Try to avoid that extra stimulation. When they see unfamiliar things, or if they're in an unfamiliar setting, they can get very aggressive or freaky. Sometimes it's best to just maintain a distance from a subject, just like you would in an autistic person. Basically, if you can, create a perimeter, a safety perimeter, if you will, contact command or the police or somebody, and see if you can get a relative or something that is familiar to that subject to them, and approach very carefully. One thing that we found helpful was have a family member approach. They know how to deal with these folks usually, and bring something with them that they can identify, not necessarily like an ID, but maybe a picture of, like in my father-in-law's case, we carried a picture of his wife so that he identified the fact that we had the picture and we were who we said we were. We were legitimate. So that is a technique that you can use. Distraction is said to be a good technique for if they get agitated, look, the Goodyear blimp. That kind of works, and then do what you have to do. Part of the problem, though, you may find is they may get themselves into an unsafe situation. Crossing streets is an example. That you may have to take immediate action, and you got to do what you got to do. Just be as careful as you can with these folks. They're very fragile. So, as far as dementia care, we deal with this all the time. Well, you guys on the medics do. You know how to talk to dementia people, and you're good at it. The problem that we're having now is money. It's economics based. People are less likely to put their loved ones into long-term care facilities or skilled nursing homes because of money, or because they're afraid of the conditions, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe they can't afford the top of the line, the Barringtons or something like that, and they don't want to put their loved one into a lesser facility. So they elect to take them into the house, in which case they find out that is not easy and it doesn't work sometimes. If you've dealt with a parent or a loved one who needs serious care in your own house, it's a disaster. It can be anyway. So sometimes poop happens. They get out, they wander off. Or the other thing we've seen is, the caregiver has to go to work. They have to make money too. So they leave the older folk, the dementia person, at home. They lock the doors the best they can, and they go to work and kind of cross their fingers and hope for the best. And sometimes these folks escape. They get out, and that's when we get called. So what are we looking for on the dementia person when we're looking for them? So dementia folks, they go in basically a straight line or making turns of one direction until they get stuck. And the thing is, they go until they can't turn around. They lack the cognitive ability to actually turn around and retrace their steps. So they may go until they run into a tree or a fence. They can't get through the fence, and they'll just stop until they die, basically, or they get found. And that is one of the profiles that is almost 100%. Excuse me. Oftentimes these folks are oriented to the past. So if you do get called for a search and you have to initiate, try to get as good a background as you can on the subject. Oftentimes they will go to the cemetery where one of their loved ones is buried, or they'll try to go back to work. Maybe they worked, like my father-in-law worked at Diebold forever in Hamilton, and he would try to walk, actually tried to drive there. That's why we ended up taking his car to Diebold, which Diebold's been gone for a while. So and he never made it there, but it was kind of scary. So they are oriented to the past. So you may want to try to identify locations that they would go and get a group there, a crew there, a squad car, whatever. A popular one with older folks, it seems like trending nationally, is McDonald's. They go for their coffee every morning, or they go have breakfast with their buddies there. And a lot of times it pays dividends to get a police unit to the local McDonald's or the local breakfast spot to find them. So it used to be that they said that the dementia profile, the Alzheimer's profile, the autistic profile would not cross major roadways. Oftentimes they would follow them, but they wouldn't cross it. That is proven to be false. So roadways are really no longer a border or a barrier. In fact, it may be one of your better clue areas, in that you might get calls from passing motorists or video cameras at the intersections. So those are things to consider. They are attracted to water and to return to former residences, place of businesses. The water is a really scary thing, and this goes across the board for Alzheimer's, dementias, autism. Water, oftentimes they're found in the water, and that's not a good outcome. So get companies, get police units, get whoever to bodies of water fairly quickly. If you're doing searches, check the pools in the area. So the backyard pools, the community pool, all those kind of places, and any lakes or reservoirs or anything in your area that that you can get to. So the other part of these folks is they're not going to leave you very many clues. They're going to go out the door and just start walking. They're not going to take anything with them. They're not going to take clothing. They're not, except for what's on their back. They're not going to take snacks or water. They're just going to walk. So there's not going to be very many clues. You might get lucky with the dog track, but that's kind of hit or miss. These folks probably are not going to respond to you. If they do, they feel that they're going to be in trouble often, so they may not respond to your shouts or cries or hails, and they're probably not going to be hollering for help. There have been some, especially in Hamilton, there were a couple instances where people heard whimpering and called 911, and the police and fire got there and found the subject, but it wasn't because they were yelling for help. It was because they were whimpering and basically beginning to succumb. So what does kill them is the environment. Hypothermia, drowning, and dehydration are the top 3 causes of death for the dementia, Alzheimer's person in a walkaway situation. So the sooner we get out on the searches and get going on it, the better. Also, it's also going to tell you what the EMS angle is going to be on these folks. So where do we find these folks? With rapid search, 80% of the time they're found uninjured, but will require EMS 98% of the time. They need to be assessed and really looked at and probably transported for further evaluation almost all the time. So there's that. They're oftentimes, so 80% of the times, they're found within a couple miles, 2 to 3 miles of the house or their last known position. And keep in mind, these folks, they don't know that they're lost. So they may resist. They may say you're full of it. They may give you a hard time a little bit, but you know how to deal with them. Just be gentle, be kind, and explain stuff to them. And if you can, get somebody who knows them to you, and they usually respond much better. These pictures are of kyphosis. We've all seen it. It's that curvature of the spine. You can see the gentleman on the sitting position. You see that pronounced bend. We show the standing with the little lady on the right-hand side. Now imagine her wandering away from her house and just walking along. She's not going to see anything. She's going to go until she stops. And heaven forbid she tries to cross the road. That could get real ugly. So that's kyphosis, and that's the kind of thing you're going to be dealing with your subjects. Autism. This is another common wanderer. These folks have a developmental disability that impairs the way the brain processes information from the senses. Sometimes this is confused with mental retardation, but these folks are not retarded. Mental retardation, as you can see there, is a disorder of communication and behavior, but it's more of a mental issue, brain issue, whereas this is more of a communication issue from the senses. So autistic folks, they have issues with communication, relationships, and empathy. They're very easily overstimulated. So how does that affect us? If we start yelling for them and go up on them aggressively, it's not going to go well. It's just not going to go well at all. These folks often prefer to be alone, and they are very ingrained in their routines. So at a certain time of the day, they are almost always at the same spot, depending on their type of autism. But across the board, they often don't fear anything. They don't understand danger. So running across I-75 is nothing to these folks. They'll play Frogger in a heartbeat, or they'll run across runways at the airports. And oftentimes transportation, as we'll see here in a minute, is a big interest to these folks. Fascinations with lights, water, and reflections. So we're back to the water, and it's very dangerous. As we've talked about with the old people, that often does not end well. They usually do go into the water. The intense interest in transportation can work to our advantage as well. If we have a transportation hub or someplace that has a lot of that, that's a good place to get a crew to check out, to start looking for them, send a police unit there. The airport in Hamilton, Fairfield is a good one, is a good example of one of where we can go to. A possible advantage for us is that we have these trucks with all these lights and shiny things on them, that it has worked in the past that we can go to an intersection, turn all of our lights on, and sometimes that will attract them to it, and we can make the grab from there. Excuse me a second. I'm recording. It's going to be a while.
When you head out, do you either, tell me what you prefer, or you can do either. Bring the 72's cribbing bundle here, or I can send the medic to go pick it up.
Okay.
We were thinking about bundling our cribbing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay.
We'll see how it works.
All right. Let me figure it out. Thanks. All right. Sorry about that. So we talked about the interest in transportation. These folks are also going to appear non-responsive, and technically they are non-responsive. They're not like a non-breather, non-responsive. They're just not going to talk to you. They may or may not even make eye contact with you. It may appear that they see through you. They have that stare. It can be a little off-putting, maybe even a little creepy. Don't worry about it, but don't expect these folks to respond to you. And more often than not, these folks are going to run. So if you approach them, be prepared. You may have to approach them, but be prepared for a chase. And sometimes if they are going to run, it may behoove us not to do the run and jump on them and tackle them to the ground. Just kind of keep track of where they're going, and then we'll come up with another plan on how to approach. 97% of the time, these folks ran. They're easily overstimulated, so if we are making an approach, it is best for a single person to walk up slowly and just talk to them very quietly and calmly instead of, the whole engine company or a bunch of policemen or a combination therein wandering up on this guy. That can cause them to completely freak out. And as far as the no fear of danger under sensitivity to pain is another thing. These are the fighters. Okay, so a lot of times they have super strength. It seems like they're strong, and they will fight you. One of the times we were out on training, this was in Virginia. We actually got pulled to help with a search with the state police for an autistic child. He was 14 years old. A state trooper found the child walking along the roadway and attempted to take custody of him, just for lack of a better term. And this 14-year-old proceeded to whoop this trooper's butt. And he called for help, and it became a big fight. And it really was not good for anybody. The police, of course, they don't want to fight a 14-year-old, but it's really bad for the kid too. So they were able to control him, but these people will fight. So be careful when you're doing that, and also consider that in your EMS assessment as well. It's possible that you will have to do some chemical sedation on these folks, but hopefully not. Hopefully we can approach a different technique and move forward with that. It says approach with caution. I think we've beat that horse to death. Again, they are attracted to lights, transportation, and water. So when you're doing your searches, your hasty searches or whatever, get people to pools, to water, to lakes, to even the creek that runs behind the cemetery and all that down there. That's a prime example. We don't want to find somebody in the water. So we need to get people to the water, and they may need to walk the water for a ways. So just consider that when you're doing your approach. All right, so now we move into what happens when we're dispatched. What do we do within that first hour? So we get dispatched to assist the police in a missing person or a lost person search. What are we listening for? We're trying to figure out and start working in your mind, is this an adult or a child? Male, female, and try to get a physical description. A lot of times they'll put that in the active 911 page or in the CAD page on your MDT. Be sure you look there, and if it's not there, ask for it. We want to know how they are traveling or what we think their mode is. So are they walking? Are they in a wheelchair? Do they have a walker? Are they cruising down the road in a Jazzy? Are they on a bike? All this will come into effect on how we set up our radiuses and what kind of search area we're looking for is really what I'm saying. So we're going there. Then what kind of facility are we going to? Is it a nursing home, a school, a hospital, Flubs? For those of you who don't know Flubs, it's awesome. It's an ice cream place. There's one in Hamilton and Fairfield, delicious. So an ice cream place, maybe the Cone. Is it a church? Is it a single family residence? Is it one of these group homes that we have popping up all over our community? All these come into effect in how you're going to change your tactics for the search. On your way in, as you're getting close, start slowing down. You don't have to go balls to the wall screaming hell bent for leather on these. Slow down, start looking around, be cognizant of the surroundings. If you don't have a description of the subject, ask for one. Please check your MDT so that we're not, beating down the dispatch center. They're probably dealing with a lot of police traffic and all that at the same time. So just check that. If you don't have it, just ask. So start looking as you're rolling up into the area. You very well may pass the subject, or you might see them walking around, and in which case, then we got to win and just call it in. All right, upon arrival, so we get there, what are we going to do? We're going to meet up with law enforcement. If they're not there, we're going to talk to the family. It's often best to find the police commander, for lack of a better term, on the scene and start working with them. It is critical that we establish a unified command. Definitely establish command. The police haven't established it like we do. So establish command just like we would do. If we don't already have a fire ground, get a fire ground, maybe even two. So you'll have to base that upon your assessment of the situation. Find out what the police know, find out what they've done, where searches have been started and instigated. So we start coming up with a plan. Keep in mind, this is a police operation, so we are there to support the PD. So we're going to work with them. Oftentimes, at least here in Westchester, they've pretty much said, what do you guys know? How can we do this differently? And we work together pretty well. I got to say that in these cases, the police have been very willing to work within the unified command structure. What has been searched? So if it's a house, has the house been searched? If the cops say, yeah, we searched it, we want to do another search. The thing is, firefighters look at searches differently than police officers do. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but so a lot of times it's very helpful to get a police officer and a firefighter to search that area, that house again. And looking at it from different perspectives definitely works. All right. We're also going to start a questionnaire, the lost person questionnaire. That is located in the battalions, and if you guys want it, we can get them sent out to the engine clipboards if you'd like. It's a 3-page document that basically you ask questions to the loved one or somebody who knows the subject, and it covers all kinds of stuff from what they were wearing, what kind of outdoor background they have, medical issues, knowledge of the area, all kinds of questions. So that helps us with the profile if we need to start building a profile on the subject. If we can get a picture, get it. So if somebody has a picture on their phone, take a picture of it, have it sent to your phone, have it sent to the battalion phone, and then battalion phone's probably the best. And then we can send that out to the responders, and then you have a visual reference for who you're looking for. Excuse me again. So as you're doing this, you'll get a feeling for, is this within our scope? How far out are we? Do we need more people? So if you need more people, call for more people. Keep in mind, you have resources besides fire department resources and PD resources available to you. The county search and rescue, county rescue team is available to you. Task Force 1, Hamilton County USAR, and there's a lot of other groups that are out there that we can initiate assistance from. Citizen volunteer groups, there is CERT teams out of Hamilton as well as Westchester that we can also employ if we need to on an extended search. Neighboring departments. So an example of this would be if we get a wanderer from Barrington, for example, or Heritage Springs, we may need to call Liberty, Mason, Deerfield to start searching some of their neighborhoods in that area as well. The news media, yep, you can use the news media. I would escalate that up the chain of command pretty quick through the chiefs and Barb Wilson and all that. You have to be very careful on what information that you want put out there and how you want to put out there. So I would not recommend people at our level talking to the media, as we do with all the other stuff. Let's refer those up the chain of command and to Barb, and we'll get that handled. Another resource we have is the reverse 911 system. Hamilton and Fairfield call it Code Red. We can't send that out through the EMA. So, and that has worked in the past. We used that in a search up at Liberty, and it worked really well. So these are options that we have available to us. Other things we do have dogs. Police dogs are an option. Usually how that works is the police consider the use of their dogs, and they'll go to the family and say, look, we can use our dogs. There's a chance that your loved one will get bitten. They're police dogs. They're not specifically search dogs. They're cop dogs, right? So oftentimes that curtails the use of the police canine. Sometimes it doesn't. But we also have search dogs available to us in the surrounding area. Ohio Task Force 1 has 2 handlers in the area. One's out of Norwood, and the other one is just north of us, I think, that they're more than happy to bring their dogs down. We can request them through the channels. They're more than happy to do that. In fact, we've had them into Hamilton before on searches as well. organizing the local citizenry that shows up. This is hard. This is almost impossible in some cases. If you can, corral them and try to give them a search area, something to do. You may even pair them up with a CERT team or other responders and integrate them into your squad, whatever. Just be aware that these are normal people, citizens. They're not cops or firemen, so they don't understand cop and firemen necessarily. With these groups, we've had problems, and we'll talk about that in the future slide here, so we can go from there. Air support, we do have air support available to us. Butler County and Hamilton County Sheriff's Department helicopters. We have flown both of those, and those are excellent resources. Hamilton County's helicopter has FLIR, forward-looking infrared. I'm not sure about Butler County's helicopter on that, but if they need it, if they want it, we can give them a tick as well if they have a co-pilot or a observer with them. Excuse me, hold on a second.
Apartment 2811, cross street of Spring Branch, for a 10-year-old being restrained and a mental disorder, 10-1304.
All right. So drones. There are agencies around us that have drones. Fairfield Township has flown a drone on, as Fairfield Township Fire has flown a drone on a missing person that we had out of Bridgewater. It wasn't particularly effective in finding the subject, but it did cull out some of the area that he could be hiding in. Butler County Sheriff's Department also will fly their drone, and they've been a help with that. There's not really any animosity or anything like that, so put that out of your mind. They are happy to come and fly for you, and that's a big drone, so that's pretty cool. It's got a lot of neat functions on it, including forward-looking infrared, so we can utilize that. It is important if you do have a bunch of resources coming in to establish a staging area. You know how to do that already? Oh, goodness. All right, so the key to this whole thing is stand by. Sorry about these interruptions.
75, Brentwood Court at Lakota Springs Drive, Brentwood at Lakota Springs Drive. For somebody bit by a dog, 1305.
Okay, so the key to this, the success of a lot of this is evaluating your resource needs quickly and then call for them as fast as possible. So if you think you need more people, call for them. Initiating that search and getting it moving is critical. And we're going to talk about that now. Oh, not quite yet. So if we do need to search a house or a room in a hotel, for example, we have to get permission to search. Otherwise, basically, it's trespassing. Now, if somebody won't let you search their house, there's probably a reason. That's when you get law enforcement involved in this, and they can explain the options that homeowner has. As I said earlier, utilizing a police officer and a firefighter is a good idea because we look at things differently. But you need to do a very thorough search of the house. Look everywhere. Just pretend like you're playing the old hide and seek game, or hiding from mom or dad. Look everywhere. Look in the crawl spaces, and unfortunately, you're going to have to get in the crawl space to look. Use your thermal imager. It's a good tool if you don't want to crawl up in there, but check everywhere. The attic, everywhere. You get the idea. So you got to look everywhere. And I say that several times because we got burned, and we're going to go over that here in a minute. When you do that, try to leave the family outside. Do a separate search. They have a tendency to distract or redirect attention as they find important, or maybe they don't want you going into an area because they have something going on in that area that maybe is illicit. So like a marijuana grow or something like that. That is definitely possible. So leave them outside. And one of the good tactics for that is have whoever is doing the missing person questionnaire do that at the same time. And that keeps them occupied answering questions and the like. So we're also going to do what's called a 300-meter search. Now, 300 meters is a long way. It's a quarter mile, basically, almost a quarter mile. In a residential area, that's really not very likely to occur. So basically what we're doing is searching the immediate area around the last known place, okay? So if it's a house in a subdivision, check the house, check the immediate area very thoroughly. Barns, sheds, playgrounds, whatever those little castle things the little kids have. You got to search them all and be extremely thorough, but be careful. You can run up on some nasty situations like angry dogs, neighbors who don't understand why you're in the backyards, why you're walking the tree lines. Be careful. Explain to them what's going on. If you've got a picture, show them a picture, kind of involve them in the incident. But we have to respect that private property. If somebody says you cannot come on my property, do not go on that property. What you do is make a note of it and call it into the command post. And more than likely, we're going to send police out there to have a discussion with them and see why we can't come on their property and go from there. So that'll become a police issue. Also, keep an eye out for hazards. You know, you don't want to step into a cistern or into something in somebody's backyard that isn't good. So just be very careful of that. We want to get that search underway ASAP and get it moving. We're going to look in cars. If there's an RV parked in there, make sure it's locked up good. Make sure that somebody can't get in it. If you can get the owner to let you in it just to poke your head in or have them poke their head in it and see if somebody's in it, that's a positive thing. Sheds, barns, definitely check those pools. If there's water, you got to get there. So check that out. Even looking at things as simple as garbage cans, culverts, any of those things, you got to look at them and do a really good search. Just kind of think about where you used to hide as a kid when you were, you know, playing in the neighborhoods or running the neighborhoods, if you did that kind of thing. If somebody is acting weird and not allowing you to enter the house or the grounds or an area, that's when, like I said, contact the command post, and we'll figure out what to do from there. Call, more than likely, we're going to send police over there to have a discussion. And it just may be somebody just doesn't understand, or it may be something else. So, but that area will be focused on by law enforcement. So these are some walking speeds. I threw these in there just to kind of give you an idea based on the importance of getting time, getting these things called fast and furious, getting the operation going. So you can see by this slide here, these are adults. So the younger, the wider the pattern, right? So at 20 to 29 years of age, you're looking at possible walking times of 3 miles per hour that they've been gone. So that starts when they walked away or the last known time seen. So if the PD or whoever doesn't initiate a search for 2 hours, you get my drift on this, our radius widens a lot. An interesting thing is even down to 80 to almost 90 years of age, they're still going 2 miles an hour. So we could have a pretty big parameter if we don't get a good jump on things. Here's the kids, how fast kids walk. I was kind of surprised at some of this. Not so much the teenagers. We know they can cover territory, but even the 1 to 3 year old, they have an average miles per hour of 1.25 miles per hour. That's a pretty long way for a little kid. So it is very rare that they go that far at that age. Usually kids have a much smaller profile as far as travel distances, but that is possible. So just keep that stuff in mind. Control resources. So we call for a bunch of resources or assets coming in. Maybe it's the county rescue, maybe it's task force, maybe it's Hamilton County, maybe it's just neighboring departments, maybe it's our departments. We want to set up a staging area as soon as possible to keep things orderly. So you know how to do that. Set up a stage, you get a staging officer, and then deploy your resources as you need to from staging. Forward operating command, you might need it. It depends on the situation. If it's a large search, you might have 2 operating commands reporting to a unified command post. But that's a big operation. Usually doesn't get that far, but sometimes sectoring things off or putting things into divisions is a very good option. Consider the planning, logistics, and operations sections. Planning, those folks are planning for the future. So where are we likely to be in 6 hours or whatever time frame we're looking at? They're looking at future operations, especially if this is a big, wide area search. Logistics are always important. So consider those. We have to make sure that our folks have someplace to go to the bathroom and someplace to eat and water, right? Those are the minimums. So consider the logistic challenges for that. Red Cross is a good option for that. And sometimes, and we've done this in the past, come up with a partnership with a local a business or a restaurant or something that'll allow us to use their bathrooms and the like. And operations is obvious. Where things get a little tricky is when you have, call them rogue searches, if you will. Those are usually emotionally charged searches looking for a loved one or somebody else. Small groups of citizens go out and are just going here, there, and everywhere. We've seen this several times on searches in the county and associated areas. People just going out on ATVs, for example, and driving around in their pickup trucks or cars or whatever. We lose some control there, and we don't like losing control, as you know. So it's important, if we can, to try to pull them in, involve them somehow, but we need to try to keep them accountable and protect ourselves at the same time. Several years ago, we had a recurrent search problem in Trenton for a guy who would wander off. He had some mental issues, but part of the problem was the neighborhood and surrounding people would go looking for him as well, which is nice. Unfortunately, they went out armed to the teeth. So eventually we had to pull our people in, corral those folks. PD had to corral those folks, basically disarm them, and then we could reinitiate the search. So just kind of keep those kind of things in mind. That is not the guns and stuff is not a common issue, but just keep that in mind that you may have to deal with things like that. First and foremost, as always, is the safety of our folks, so accountability is a big deal. So how do we track resources and where we've searched? This was from a search in District 5 on the border along Lesorgeville, Westchester. We did several years ago, and what we did was we took the page out of the map book and we just used highlighter, and we highlighted the streets and the areas that were searched. And basically, as you can see up in the corner there, I know it's probably hard to see on your screen, but we color-coded, made a little legend of who did that search, and we went from there. That is a quick, down and dirty field way of doing it, and it works. So that is something that we can consider. Google Maps, Google Earth is another good one. We use Google Earth Pro with the technical rescue team, and some other options with there. You can use your cell phones to kind of get an idea of mapping. So, everybody's got Google on their phone, so you can look at the layout of the land a little bit and use that. County maps. The important thing is, no matter how you do it, and this here is a good way of doing it. No matter how you do it, keep track of where you searched. That way we don't double search or triple search accidentally. We have better use of our resources. You know the story on that. But it also keeps track of where we have in the event that we have to justify ourselves in a court of law, or to whoever else, right? We show that we have searched these areas, we've done our due diligence and so forth. It also will help with accountability. So if you know that engine 71 is in this area, you're gold. Or you have police in this area, you got coppers there. Just keep track to the best of your ability where everybody is. It's no different than being on a fire scene. So this is a search, an accidental search out of Hamilton, and if the point all the way to the top of the slide there, one of Hamilton medic units was on Northwest Washington Boulevard there up in the upper right, and they saw a subject standing with his face against the trees there. So they thought that was odd, and they pulled down that little side street there and approached and found a very disoriented elderly male. Turns out that he was an Alzheimer's guy who wandered away from his care facility, which is down there in the the terminus of the line there, kind of down in the lower left corner there. That is like one of those residential care houses where they put 5 or 6 people in there and take care of them to the best of their ability, kind of thing. So he went out the front door. He turned to the left, went down to a decision point, which is the crossroads, turned left. You can see the pattern. He turned left everywhere he went. So these are things that we can consider when doing a search. If we find out we've got sightings on 2 left hands, we know to start looking towards the left. But that was a search that we were fortunate on. It was hot that day, and I don't know which medic out of Hamilton it was, but they did a really good job. And that did initiate a pretty large-scale search, but we were searching in reverse. We were searching for where the guy came from, not from where the guy was. So, and of course, he had no ID or anything on him. The police did a really good job finding that house. They knew their area. So that is a positive of involving the first-in companies, whether it be fire or police. They know their districts, they know their areas, and we can utilize that. This is another one out of Hamilton. This is a little strip center. And I can't remember where it is. I think it's right along High Street. So the story was, it was a very hot day. Guy mowing his grass in one of those houses behind where you see the body symbol there. And he heard a whimpering, crying, and he thought that was weird, even for Hamilton. He called 911. They initiated a police car, and they found the subject in the back. He had wandered away from his house, got out, and he wandered until he couldn't go any further. He had Alzheimer's. He wandered away and like I said, until he couldn't go any further, and he just basically sat down or collapsed when he couldn't stand anymore, and he was suffering from heat exhaustion and so forth when the medics got to him. So he was in some dire straits there for a little while, and he was released from the hospital. But these are the kind of things that we might get calls for. So this is another wander away. The interesting thing on this is when he got to decision points again, he turned left. They oftentimes will turn in one direction, and like 80-something% of the time, it's left. So that's kind of an interesting thing to know. Oh, shoot. All right, so this was a search out of Ross. This is kind of that one where we kind of got beat up a little bit for. The story was a teenage girl is going to get in trouble for fighting with her brother, and they couldn't find her. They felt that she had taken off into the woods, and a search was initiated. So all in all, we had 82 searchers on various means: cars, trucks, ATVs, foot, 12 law enforcement agencies, the news media, a couple helicopters. And just for a point of reference, the circle down towards the bottom is the fire department, Ross Township Fire Department. And the little circle up top is actually where the house is that the search initiated from. So you can see there's a lot of woods and so forth in that area, and those were being actively searched by various peoples and agencies and so forth. So there's another view of it. So what happened was, the They interviewed the people. They did a search of the house. They didn't find anybody inside the house. It was a hasty search. The big search was initiated. And then subsequently, another search was done of the house with the police and a firefighter and a police officer. And she was found in between the mattresses of her bedroom. And this is really kind of where that police look at searches one way, fire looks at things another way, and working together, they saw the abnormality with the mattress, and they found her asleep in between the mattresses. So in sum, slow down as you're on the way in, get a full story, get a description, call your resources early. If you think you need them, call them. You can always turn them around, right? Search the home like we just talked about between police and fire. Do a good area search. It doesn't have to be 300 meters. You have to use your judgment on that. 300 meters is dang near a quarter mile, so you may or may not be able to do that. Those are our references if you're interested. If anybody has any questions on that, please feel free to call me or email me or whatever. You all have my phone number. Don't hesitate to call. If you're on a search and you need additional information, don't hesitate to call myself. Call Brian Hanna out of Hamilton. If you know him, he's very knowledgeable on this. He does an excellent job. You can also call EMA and get them moving. So with that, we're pretty much done with this portion. Now we move on to the practical. At station 73, 74, and 71s, you can do whatever you want, really. We've set up at the park next to station 74 some clues for you to find. They're going to be in bags, kind of like, well, exactly like this. It'll have an envelope in it with something in it for you to identify, okay? So the purpose of this, the goal of this is just to work on our skills of actually finding clues. So what I'd like you to do is when you find your clue, take note of it to the best of your ability, describe the area that you found it in and what was inside the envelope. And just send me an email with whatever findings you are. Station 75 and 72s, we've got you set up at Keener Park. So do the same thing. But I will tell you, we're not going to I didn't put anything out in the woods. These will all be areas that you can easily get to without getting too involved into the operation, and you can remain pretty close to your apparatus. So just do that, have fun, look around, think about where you would go, where you might hide. If you were being searched for, if you were lost, or if you were hiding from somebody, where would you go? Or what are logical places for a subject to go? And you can use either the dementia profile or an autistic profile for this. It doesn't matter. So have fun with it. Send me your emails. And I think Jim Cox has already deployed this training in RMS. So call me with any questions. I appreciate your time. I'm sorry it took long. It's a little over an hour, but I think it's worth it. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.